This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a WFPro Live mini session where this morning what I'm going to be talking about is a topic that's come up in the reporting forum on Q-topic reporting. It's actually an old post that was recently revived, and it is a post that refers back to an old report that uses some HTML to share some columns and render some Q-topic reports in a nice presentation. Well, this post was recently revived due to the fact that a user had indicated these reports were not working in New Experience, and so the screenshots here led me to follow up with sort of a response and an explanation as to why they're not working. And really the reason behind them not working is the fact that some of the new changes that are being put in place, new designs for reporting in New Experience are not in parity with Classic Experience. And so I've been partnering with Lily at Workfront to test some of these custom views against New Experience. And Lily had asked me to verify whether or not some of these are actually working. And so I thought, what better way to do that than to just simply kick off a recording. And let's jump in and take a look at these reports. And I'll show you, Lily, and everyone really who is interested what the comparison looks like and why I see issues with the way New Experience is rendering reports now. So, and I'm confident that Workfront will have these issues ironed out, but this is going to be the best way for me to share those experiences that I'm having as I try these out. So the first thing I'll point out here is I'll have two tabs open. One is going to be the Classic experience, and the next is going to be the New Experience. So these are two different instances, but the code behind these views is very much the same. So we can see here between Classic and New Experience, there's clearly a difference in the presentation, but most of this appears to be rendering pretty nicely. So but let's dive in a little further. So the first thing I do notice here, and I know this is something y'all are aware of, but the fact that all these reports are expanded by default is important. In Classic, they're all expanded, but in New Experience, they are not. So you can see here a Command F searching for text wouldn't actually maybe find the text buried down within these menus because they're collapsed. So I think making sure these are expanded is going to be important. But beyond that, it looks like the shared columns and the HTML are rendering pretty nicely, both in this report up here and in these additional menus of navigation down here on the left, as well as in the center. So overall, those appear to look pretty nice so far. Now, let's jump back to this Classic just to see if there's anything that stands out. One thing I did mention in an email, but to Lily, but I'll mention here is that there seems to be in the shared columns, there seems to be more space being inserted in those shared columns, and I'll show. I think I have another example of that somewhere else. But if we look at New, you can see there's quite a bit more, maybe another 20 pixels or so of space rendering in here at the end of these, or maybe at the beginning. I'm not sure, but there's space, and I think it's at the end. And the reason I think it's at the end is because when I wrap this in a block and make it look like a button, like a square button, there's a big gap on the right hand side of the button. So it doesn't look that bad here, but when it's a button, it makes it look really bad, because then there's, like I say, 20 pixels of padding on the right-hand side of the button, and it's really just wasted space in the user interface. So that's that space issue I was referring to, and it appears to only happen when there are in fact shared columns being used. Now, one of the things I like to do is make sure we come in and take a look at edit. So editing the dashboard, you all know what that looks like. Now, let's try that here. Okay. So I think everything here looks like it worked pretty well. I am noticing this a lot. These double scroll bars are appearing in quite a few places, and it's really kind of difficult to when we really in here editing reports and dashboards often. These kinds of full scroll issues, they just make things pop off the screen when they typically wouldn't, or they capture the focus of your scroll when you typically wouldn't expect it. So these are just some of the little things that, and you know, so I mean, we have the scroll here, but again, you notice there's no scroll over here. So those are the little things I'm starting to pick up on in the new experience. So I think that all looks okay. Now we'll move on to the next report that we've been testing, which is the store catalog. And this is a project report, and it is pretty heavy on text mode and shared columns and HTML. But this report has it takes advantage of a lot of reporting features. So we use, you know, column headers here, and we have groupings, and we have text mode used in these groupings, and a lot of text mode in these columns, and background shading on cells, filter rules that highlight cells based on, you know, conditions. So pretty robust report. And so if we take a look at this same report in new, so upon first load, it's collapsed, but when we expand it, now this in this environment doesn't have all the same data, but you can see, you know, you get the idea that it is rendering, and it's rendering pretty nicely. It appears to be doing its job fairly well so far. Now the fact that these are all caps is inconsistent with what we see in Classic, so I think that needs to go back. But beyond that, let's see. So not real crazy about the shading. It just all seems really washed out, the grays. You know, the Classic is what I and all of our existing users are used to. They're used to these grouping colors. Was never a fan of changing that, but got to do what you got to do, I guess. Here are the spaces I was talking about in those shared columns in buttons. So it's pretty significant. It just it takes away the real detailed control we once had over the space in there. So if you look at these, there is no space. So it just renders nicely. So it'd be nice if you could find a way to correct that. Now, everything else seems to be rendering properly in here in the view. Now, when I go into edit this report, I'm going to do the same up here. This all changes pretty significantly. And I'm assuming the HTML is going to render because I see some of it rendering down there the same way. Again, it all just looks so washed out. But for those of us who are familiar with where these things are, we know where to go to look for these things. So everything here appears to be correct. I can still switch to text mode and just do everything I need to do there. And there's that same double scroll issue I was referring to earlier. It's happening here in the edit screen. So now, one thing I noticed earlier is I'm going to duplicate this report tab real quick. I'm going to edit this first one, and I'm just going to add a column real quick, and just pull in the name. And okay, that was weird. I should have been able to add a column. Let's try that in Classic. This is a simple column, just pull in the name. Ah, okay. There must be something wrong with my report. So I'll have to dig into that later. Okay. Well, let's not add a column. Maybe let's just change an existing column. So we'll call this, we'll change the header of this column to test. And oh, okay, it's not even going to let me edit the report. Interesting. I will have to dig into that one later. Okay. Well, what it was that happened is that I was going to try to replicate was when I made a change to this report and I clicked apply to the change, and then I clicked the refresh icon here to reload that change and see it, it did not apply that change to my view when I hit the refresh icon. I had to refresh the entire report, which surprised me. That's not consistent with Classic, but I'll have to try to reproduce that in another report. Now, but let's jump to the next feature of this report, which is important. So the sharing of this report is set so that this is a publicly accessible report. So the same is true in Classic. So if I go into sharing here in Classic and copy this public link, and I paste that in a new tab, I'll just put it right here to the right. There you see this same report loads, but instead of it loading from within Workfront, it's loading as sort of a publicly accessible URL. And you see I'm not logged into Workfront up here. There are no familiar navigation or anything like that. So this looks good. So now if we come in here and copy this link, it looks like I've copied it there. And if I open a new tab and paste that link and open it, put it right here next to it. First thing I notice is the tab in my browser says reporting, which is strange because the public reports typically all say Workfront. So that I think is misconfigured or should probably be consistent. But the next thing I notice here is I have a Workfront navigation menu across the top, which is kind of strange because this is a public report and I shouldn't be seeing any Workfront sort of navigation up here or functionality. So I thought, well, maybe we should copy this URL and just go ahead and see what happens when we put it into a brand new web browser window that I have not used to authenticate to Workfront, I don't believe. In fact, let's make sure we're not authenticated to preview here. Okay, we're not. So now if I paste that URL for that public report, what happens? Okay, that happens. So it looks like it's loading sort of properly, but it's throwing an error that says I have not logged in. It's still collapsed, but I can expand it and see the data. But this is, I think, related to the other issue, which is I'm seeing navigation on that report when I shouldn't. So there's inconsistency there that is important to be resolved. So moving on then, there's a third report, which is an event report. So this is the report in Classic, and it's similar. It's a report that also has a public URL. So we'll take a look at these two and compare them real quick. Now, this is the new experience version. So I'm just expanding this. It looks like, yes, it does look like for the most part, it's rendering everything okay. So, but the same issue with the public URL, I think, is going to be true for this report. Now, in this case, I should be able to duplicate this report and replicate that problem I was talking about with the refresh. So let me edit this report and jump into where we have the name. And so the name is being rendered right here in this part of the report. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change that. I'm going to do like a concat, and I'll just put name and then the word test on the end. So see, even that, it was hard for me to get down to apply. I got caught in that scroll, I got caught in that scroll, and then finally I see apply. Those little things will drive us developers crazy. So now when I refresh this, let's see if it picks up on that change. Oh, okay, it did. So my bad. I didn't think it did before with the refresh, but appears as though it did. So scratch that. All right, so I think that concludes my testing for now. I hope it's helpful for you all at Workfront or really anyone involved. I hope it helps you kind of understand some of the issues that we see with some of the new lists and the reason why the new lists, whether they be rolled out now in Classic or they be used in new, they need to function in parity with Classic. It's extremely important that they do. So I think this video pretty much illustrates why. So you know, reach out to me in the community if you have any questions about any of this that I've talked about. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. Thanks, and talk to you all soon.